Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show.
So we're working with customers on different levels where it might be a box product, a customized piece of hardware, it might be a board, and then all the way down to the embedded level with some Wi-Fi modules that we sell and can customize as well.
Want to connect your product to the Internet of Things? The first step is giving it senses, and then connectivity. In this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show, I speak with Adam Justice, a second-generation sensors guy who takes us through the two main approaches to get your products, assets, or environment onto the next-generation interweb, known as the Internet of Things.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com.
With me today on episode 1 is Adam Justice. Adam is Vice President and General Manager of Grid Connect, a manufacturer and distributor of networking products and wireless sensors, and he is responsible for developing the vision for the Connect Sense wireless sensor product line. I thought Adam would be a great guest to walk us through what's involved in connecting products to the Internet of Things. Adam, good to speak with you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
So it seems like you've had a little bit of hecticness. What have you been working on as of late?
All kinds of things. We're kind of starting to work on our next generation of ConnectSense products. We launched ConnectSense, our Wi-Fi-based sensors, into the market last November. So Here we are a year later and just trying to kind of move the ball forward and continue to make some great IoT products and put them out in the market.
And you've been working with products on some with customers on some deployments lately? We
have. So we took our base ConnectSense technology and we're now working with customers to help apply that technology to their products and problems and solutions to help people get their products, connected to the internet and IoT enabled.
Well, good. I want to talk about that, but why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and your background in IoT?
Sure. So I have been at Grid Connect for 6 years. Grid Connect was a company started by my father, actually, kind of coming out of a previous company he started and then got acquired and spit back out. But he's really been in the embedded networking space for over 20 years. Grid Connect's been around for 11 now, and our focus has always been on embedded communication. So what we like to say is we've really been doing IoT long before it was called IoT. So, our expertise has always been in kind of the embedded communication, custom hardware, and things like that. And we saw an opportunity. So since I've come into the company, we sold some sensors into more of the IT market and continued to get feedback from customers that they wanted something more affordable with some more features. And so I kind of saw what was going on in the market as a consumer and as somebody in this business and really saw an opportunity to build something better. And as we sort of went down that path, we really found that as we made the sensors a lot simpler, they started to make sense outside of that IT market and more for like a home and consumer application. So I kind of led our team internally here to build that product. and have since been kind of championing IoT here at Grid Connect.
Now, is this product also embedded, or is it standalone?
It's a standalone consumer product, but then, as I said, we're kind of taking the technology and helping using that base technology that we built, because we also built our own cloud from scratch. Okay. So we have a couple different ways to slice it. So we're working with customers on different levels, where it might be a box product, customized piece of hardware, it might be a board, and then all the way down to the embedded level with some Wi-Fi modules that we sell and can customize as well.
Wow, actually, that leads us perfectly, into I guess my first question, which is, I'm a business guy. I'm at my company. I want to either have a connected product, connect my assets, connect my environment, whatever the case may be. But what are my options? So what are the different ways to connect a product or an asset to the Internet of Things?
Yeah, we're hearing this a lot from companies that, the business guys understand that they need to be connected to the internet to be competitive, but networking is not something a lot of people have had to be involved with up until now. So it's a pretty foreign concept to people, and it can be rather complicated. So that's kind of where we've come in to help people understand the networking piece and do it right. Because you can't just throw a Wi-Fi module in and call it done. It's a lot more complicated than that. So what we're finding is for a lot of companies, doing sort of a retrofit add-on is a great way to get something to market quickly. So just an example, we worked with somebody that does a water shutoff valve for homes and businesses. So they had a great product, and it just had a relay output on the device. So we were able to get that hooked up to a modified version of our dry contact sensor, such that we're able to fully control their device from the internet now. So they have a product now that they can get out into the market that's just an add-on box that adds connectivity options and control to their current device. Meanwhile, we're working on a strategy with them to do a build-in on future generations of their product. So it can kind of be a phased approach, and it's going to be different for everybody. Obviously not everybody has relay outputs like that. So you just kind of got to see what makes sense for you. But kind of an add-on is a great way to get something turned around, really quick. We're doing projects like that in, a month. So that's a really great way for people to stay competitive.
Yeah, and maybe you could share a few other examples. I mean, what are some of the other things you're seeing for this add-on? And then I want to talk a little bit more embedded and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason we seem to see a lot of water-based stuff, but we've also been working with a sump pump manufacturer, kind of a battery backup system. And it's almost the same kind of situation. They want an add-on product to get something to market real quick. They're seeing a huge amount of demand for this, and meanwhile, we're going to work on next generation stuff with them as well.
You don't want to get pigeonholed, huh?
Yeah, I know. So, but I think that's something that makes sense in a lot of places.
Yeah,
and
it does make sense.
You just got to evaluate it for your business and what makes sense. And we've had other customers where it made sense to go right into the build-in stage as well.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk to you. I mean, it does seem at a high level make a lot of sense to just do a retrofit or a bolt-on to an existing product that you have. But where does it, and then a phase 2, maybe design it right into it. But where does it make sense to maybe skip that, or are there different options for retrofitting, or maybe paint a little bit more detail there? Yeah,
I mean, what we're finding with the retrofitting now is that it's a little bit more expensive proposition. So sometimes it doesn't always make sense, but in some of these it's a good quick option to have a solution in the meantime, and it depends on what kind of connectivity and outputs they have on the current device that we can kind of tap into. if it's a sealed product, that there really isn't any good way to talk to it right now, whether that's relay outputs or serial communications or something like that. If there's no good way to tie into it, then there's not much we can do. So.
Okay, and that's what you're saying from an expense point of view. I was going to ask you where are the expenses, but I suppose if you can't connect to it in some easy way, then that's going to make it, I guess, potentially prohibitively expensive.
Right.
Okay, and so then the other option, let's say bolt-on works for certain circumstances. So what's the criteria that you've seen where a bolt-on, I don't know if that's the technical term, or retrofit makes sense? What are the attributes of the product for this scenario to work? What's needed?
I would say a little bit of more higher end product that can kind of demand the cost for this, because these retrofit options we're seeing are over $100 in cost usually. So that's very different than the the embedded solutions, which can be sub $10 when you're just talking adding a Wi-Fi module. So that's a big range there, but that involves redesign and that whole process. So it really just comes down to having that quick and easy way to communicate and get some information out of the device, and that. Unfortunately, for a lot of manufacturers, that's a decision that was probably made long ago. So, if you have a way to get some good data out of the device to make that retrofit work, then it's a good, quick way. Otherwise, we're starting to talk redesign or, a custom board or something like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to use these rough numbers, $100 versus, I think you said less than 10. Is that providing the same functionality? Notwithstanding, of course, what you implied, there has to be the design work and basically a redesign of the product. But is that on par in terms of functionality, for a bolt-on versus an embedded solution?
I would say yes and no. It would all depend on kind of what you have on board with the product today. Okay. So the sub 10 is really just kind of the connectivity piece, but we're finding with some of the stuff we're doing, really surprising of what we can get done, in those little modules.
So you're having to kind of get down and dirty and do some assembly programming or something?
No. Thankfully, we work with some partners. We're a partner with Marvell, and they have a really great SDK on their Wi-Fi chip. So you can actually build an application on top of that. So there's some really, really great stuff you can do with that.
Okay. And with respect to embedding a sensor, shifting over to embedding, I know this is, I guess, very complicated and convoluted, but can you give us some broad strokes, and what are the high-level steps, that have to be done or that you've seen for if you're planning on doing, just to give business folks, kind of the headspace as to what they need to be thinking about?
So I think the important thing to think about sensors is, sensors can really be anything, but it's really the way that our devices get context to the world around them. If you think about machines and computers, they really they don't know anything unless we tell it to them. So sensors is kind of their way of gaining that context to certain things, whether that's temperature or motion or humidity or all different kinds of things. So, with each of those, you kind of just got to have to look at, what's available in the market, what form factor works for your product. If there's something available and reliable that you want to use, versus kind of building your own. So as we build ConnectSense, we kind of made those decisions ourselves. Temperature and humidity, we found a solution in the market, versus water, we built our own sensor from the ground up. So because there wasn't really anything that fit what we were looking for. Others, we were working with a customer as a large building owner in New York City, and they wanted to measure gas levels. And that's a sensor I'm not going to touch with a 10-foot pole. I want a certified, really robust, something I can find in the market, because I'm certainly not going there with the liability involved in gas measurement.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. So, yeah, and I guess this does start with what you're trying to sense. I mean, and obviously that would be tied in some way or form to the business value that you're trying to derive from the product. And I guess I would imagine that would be the first step, or is there even something a little bit before that if you're looking at sensors in general? I mean, when starting to make your decisions there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just kind of got to look at what you're trying to sense, what's available in the market, and what sort of fits your application, and ultimately what's your sort of business goal to that. So you kind of got to look at the sensor piece, you got to look at the connectivity piece, you need to look at the cloud piece, and a few more things along the way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this will bring up the next question. I mean, and for me, I'm trying to understand what's the process that you go through, with your customers to choose the right sensors. I mean, are they going through a catalog? I mean, what are the constraints? I guess you did bring up connectivity could be a constraint that would maybe eliminate some of the sensors. I don't know if cloud is in any way a constraint, but what's the process that you go through to choose the right sensors for whether it's a bolt-on or whether it's an embedded type product?
Yeah, I mean, typically most of our customers that we work with will kind of give us the problem at hand, and then we will go out and do that research on trying to find the right sensor or sensing technology to solve their problem. So we try to pad our customers from having to figure out stuff like that, but then we will present them with a couple options to see what they want to do.
So how do you fit into this? Now, I imagine that they would have, some domain experience within, obviously, their company. They would give you, like you were saying, they would give you their problem statement or what they're trying to sense. Then you're saying you go out and, I don't know if source is the right word, because obviously you manufacture as well, but you would find it, go back to them. But how does that look? Are you working directly with the end user at this point? Are you working with a system integrator? Are you working with some design house? What's the typical scenario for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we do work with kind of all of the above. But sometimes it's the end customer, sometimes it's a third party that's working with them, and we'll using the example again of the kind of gas sensor. The customer said, this is our problem. We'd like to detect gas levels. I think there was last year there was a big building explosion in New York City, and obviously sent a scare through building owners, and so. We immediately knew that wasn't something we were going to build. So we kind of went out into the market to look at the right solutions that had proper certifications and, kind of everything to meet their requirements.
Makes sense. Now, what advice would you give to, I guess, end customers if they're working through a third party? I mean, is there any advice you could give them to make sure that they're, making the right decision, or they're making an efficient decision, or is there anything that they should be aware of when working through a third party? I
would say, just make sure that you give as much information as possible on your requirements, so that, the right solution can come to your door, and stay involved and active in the process. So you don't end up with, something that doesn't fit your needs.
No, that makes sense. So just a real clear definition of, I guess, like you said, just a definition of what they're looking for. The more clear, the better.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's get a little bit techie. So we have an IoT we have the sensors. We're going to have some sort of a sensor network. How are these connected? What is the actual interface between the networking component and the sensor? What has to be taken into account here?
So I think this is something that's a little bit different for everybody. For us, we're just using a serial interface to talk to the sensors.
Okay. In all cases, you're saying?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Or doing kind of, I guess not all cases. In some, we're doing kind of like an analog to digital conversion, that kind of thing, depending on the sensor and kind of what kind of data it's spitting out.
Okay.
So we'll have an interface for that, and we use on ConnectSense we use embedded Linux. So we have a processor running embedded Linux that will take that data and then interface it up to our cloud. So we built our own cloud from scratch. So we kind of have our own platform. There are a lot of other great cloud providers out there at varying price points. So it's definitely something to take into account. And they all kind of work different ways, but in general, most of them have kind of their own base API, which is how they're going to securely get data up to the cloud. And everybody sort of has their own philosophies on what goes to the cloud. Some people are sending all their data to the cloud. Some people are doing some processing in the end device and then sending, more like summary data up to the cloud. So I think that kind of depends on, what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish and kind of what your bandwidth is available. And how heavy of a device do you want on the endpoint? So, because obviously a device that's doing some analysis is going to need some more processing power and a little bit more higher end, hardware versus something that's just going to spit everything to the cloud. You can offload some of that processing power to the cloud.
Mm-hmm. And where are you seeing the cost benefits? And maybe it's too general of a question, but you can have your smart end nodes or your smarter sensors, and like you said, maybe doing a little bit of the heavy lifting versus having really light end nodes and having all the lifting done in the cloud. Are there any trends? I mean, is it a clear-cut case in terms of costs? Which is the better way to go?
I would say it's still very much the wild, wild west. And I am not really seeing a clear trend. I would say in general, most things today, most people are sending all the data to the cloud. But I think some of the people that are doing more of the heavy lifting on the endpoint are thinking more forward thinking of 5-10 years down the road, where we're just not going to be able to handle that much data in the cloud. So you're going to need to do some crunching on it before you send up and look at more aggregate data. So I think that makes sense. And it's just going to be where the business cases drive it. And, I think the market will decide.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and that's interesting. It is still the wild, wild west, I suppose, and I guess it would be very specific on the the application of the product that you're doing and what you want it to do with. But let's circle back to the actual. I can't get enough of the tech, so let's circle back on your embedded Linux environment. This you're using to connect up to some code that's in your sensors that connect the sensor to your cloud and or some other API? Is that where it comes in, or how? Just zoom in on that connection there of between the sensor and, let's say, the cloud, I guess.
Sure. In our case, we actually have another chip on the device, which is it's called an MSP430, which is a low power processor. So that's some of our sensors also run on batteries. So that's one of the ways that we operate in a low power mode, is to allow that device to kind of communicate with the sensor, and then only wake up the heavier embedded Linux side of the device, once there's an event or, something happens. So, for instance, our water sensor works this way. So, in the event of water, we'll be sitting in a low power sleep mode, and if there's a water event, then it'll wake up the Linux, connect the Wi-Fi, and report the data that there's flood in your basement. Like that.
And so this is done again with code that's running on the on the MSP 430 chip, or how's that?
Right. Yeah. So
where's that code?
We have code on the MSP 430 chip, which is watching the sensors, and then it will wake up the Linux environment and also pass that data, the sensor data, to it once it wakes up.
Now, in these, going back to the sensor selection, are you, or not you, but are the customers, the end user customers, are they siloed into a specific manufacturer? Are sensors yet, I guess, standardized that you can maybe pick sensors from different manufacturers? Is that a constraint that has to be sort of taken into consideration? Is it just temporal nature, or is it just the way it's going to be?
No, speaking from somebody who's attended the Sensors Expo here in Chicago, there are a ton of different sensors manufacturers to sense anything you can dream of. And they come in all kinds of different form factors, and it's a whole huge industry. So there's a lot to choose from.
And do they all work with each other, or are you going to be kind of limited by, I don't know, protocols that they use? I guess power would be another limiting one, but yeah, I mean, I do get a sense there's probably literally thousands and thousands of different sensors out there. But what I'm wondering is, the state of interoperability between all these sensors. Are they interoperable, or does it have to be done with special code?
Yeah, I would say the interoperability really comes on a different level. Most of these sensors are what I would call dumb and unconnected. They're just putting out an analog signal, a digital signal, very low level stuff. And it takes a platform like ours to really add intelligence on top of that sensor. So interoperability comes in more when you start to talk about different protocols or, wireless standards, things like that. That's really where we're starting to see the interoperability more on the application layer than really the hardware layer.
Yeah. And so do you take advantage of different application protocols, mix and match?
Again, I'll go to the wild, wild west here. As early as February of this year, I was, I give a lot of talks on this topic, and I was saying, we need people to solve this problem. We need interoperability. And now, here we are, and it almost feels like there's too much going on in this space. Every week there's a new, forum or association or group that's coming out with their own standards. So I think a lot of progress is being made here, but there's also going to now have to be some consolidation of standards. So we have things like Apple's HomeKit that was announced a few months ago, which is an interoperability standard for Apple devices in the home. We just were at Google last week to hear more about the Thread Alliance, which is Google, Samsung, ARM, Silicon Labs, a couple other
big ass fans.
My favorite company name in IoT. So they're solving things more on a network layer. So that doesn't even really give you interoperability at the application layer either. No. And they were not pretending that it did. So everybody's trying to solve those problems in different ways, and I think there's some promising things going on there, but I think it's something that will be more solved in 2015 and beyond. And then there's guys like AllSeen and AllJoin that are doing some interesting stuff as well. So I think the market will decide what they like, and I think we'll see some consolidation of those standards and groups over the coming years.
The standardization of the standards, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, let's talk about the market a little bit more and the cost. So what are the costs associated with sensor selection? Is it just, you run your finger down a catalog, pick one, and that's the cost? Or what are some other costs that people need to be thinking about?
Right. So, I mean, there's the cost of sensors, there's the cost of connectivity. You need to have something to kind of run your application on. So, in some cases, some people might have some of these pieces baked into their product today, and they might just need the connectivity piece, or, maybe they're going to need, a whole new kind of set of things. So, sensors can really range in costs from, pennies to fairly expensive. It depends on, what you're sensing and the form factor and things like that. In terms of connectivity, the price is really going down. I would say the price of sensors are really going down too. I think what has given us this explosion in IoT is really a couple things: the price of connectivity going down, the price of sensors going down, and then the cloud really coming into play. And those three things put together have really created this IoT market.
Yeah, the cost of cloud going down as well.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
And it's interesting. So, if you guys were to do it again, would you rebuild your own cloud platform? Because you did say that you constructed one from the ground up.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't change a thing. It was expensive to do and time consuming, but it also has allowed us some unique advantages. We're pretty unique in that we sort of have an end-to-end solution from hardware all the way to cloud. So that's really opened us up to some unique opportunities. And, looking at the cloud market, some of these cloud providers are pretty expensive. Some of them, you guys are talking $50,000 before you can even get started. So that's, a huge upfront cost for some people. But, the time will tell. But, I think it has given us some unique advantages. So we have no regrets there. But obviously, everybody's not going to want to do that, and the time to market to do that. If you want to get to market quickly, you don't necessarily want to start from scratch. So we were afforded that we started early, and we're here now. So it's not going to make sense for everybody.
And when you say, when you say $50K before you even get started, you're talking about, a company that is building their own cloud infrastructure versus using one like yours. Is that what you mean?
Right. So, often with our customers, we'll build in the cost of the cloud into the hardware. But obviously, some of these pure cloud companies, they can't do that. So you're paying for, licensing and your own server and that kind of stuff. So, that stuff adds up.
So that does bring us to an interesting point. What is your business model? And you just sort of hinted at it just a second ago. And what are the business models in the market right now? And again, looking at the front end, but it could be for everything. But what are you seeing out there right now?
I would say there's a lot of different ways to cut it. We're a hardware company, so our business model is around selling hardware. So everything we do is really for that. So even building our own cloud, we don't charge a customer for that cloud because our ultimate goal is to sell hardware, and we don't want to put too many barriers in place to sell hardware. The cloud companies, they're in the business to sell cloud licenses. So, that's really how their business model works. So, there are some people that are charging for, even like end customers are charging for cloud services. I think it depends on your user base. I would say in the consumer space, consumers have expectations that, cloud is sort of built in. You can thank Google and Apple and, some of the people that set that precedence. But, I think early on customers, the one that really sticks in my mind was, I think it was Kwikset or Schlage had a really early connected lock, but it came with these massive monthly fees that they wanted to charge. And it totally didn't go anywhere. And so, had they rethought that and included the cloud, I bet there would be a lot more connected locks out there, and you wouldn't see these guys like August who have an awesome product that have emerged and are suddenly a threat to to some of the lock guys that have been around for a long time. So I think that's an important piece to it, and you really have to think about what's important to your customer and what they're willing to pay.
And so your business model is simply a line item. Is there any ongoing costs associated with it after the fact for your sensors?
So, like I said, it was important for us to not have a recurring monthly fee. But it was also important to us to have a reliable product. So there are ongoing costs for us to maintain that cloud infrastructure, but built out over many products, and they're pretty nominal over the course of time. The one thing for us that does cost money and was phone calls and text messages. So to reliably send phone calls or place phone calls and send text messages, it costs money. We use a provider, a telephony provider. Drawing a blank on their name, but I'll think of it. Okay. But anyways, so we included 500 text messages and 60 phone calls with each of our devices. So, our philosophy was we wanted to include way more than a normal user would ever need. And if there's a power user that's going to need more of them, we'll just charge them a nominal fee for it. So out of the box, there's no extra cost. But if you're using those regularly, then, you'll gladly pay a couple bucks to add some more to your account.
But just to clarify, the text messages and the calls, are these for support or for something different?
So we actually have alerts built into our platform. So
okay.
For using the water example, you could say, if there's water in my basement, then I want to call to my cell phone.
Got it.
So to reliably do that, there are some free ways to do that, but it's not very guaranteed. So to reliably do that, you really have to use a service. We use a service called Twilio. I knew I would think of it. So really nice telephony API that you can use. But it does cost money, so kind of have to build that in.
Okay, so it's a one price, except if you do go beyond, I guess, your plan, so to speak, the 500.
And that's definitely a business model I think people can use where, there's no cost out the gate, and if you're you could kind of add tiers to it. So everybody else slice it a different way. It depends on what matters to you and your customers, and, what the market will tolerate.
No, for sure. What are you seeing? I mean, if someone's approaching the connected product market for the first time, what are you seeing as being some of the friction points that they should consider? I mean, what are some of the unspoken, advice that you can give them when, approaching the project of a connected product?
I mean, I think you kind of have to have a justification for it, and you got to make sure it's done well. I think I said this earlier, but you can't just throw wireless into something and expect it to be IoT enabled. You really have to build an application around it and use cases that make sense for the customer and provide value. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to cut it from a manufacturer perspective and, from a consumer perspective. It can't just be, now you can control this with your mobile phone. You really got to provide value beyond that. So one of the great examples in my mind is thinking about like a washer and dryer. So, on the consumer end, they might be able to get alerts of, when the washer or dryer is done. Okay. And on the manufacturer level, it can be things like knowing what functions they use on the washer to provide a better product going forward. So if there's 20 functions on it, but you can gather aggregate data and find out that really these are the 10 core functions that people actually use, you can use that to build better products over time. Same thing, you can monitor different parts in that washer to know when something's failing, or you can know, okay, there's an issue here and we're seeing it across our entire line. And then you can provide proactive customer service. So that becomes a better customer experience because you get a phone call before your washer breaks and you set it up to proactively do maintenance rather than have it fail. And then there's kind of, for the manufacturers, there's also what I call the sawdust model, which is that you can use usage data to sell to other providers. So in the washer example, you have to use detergent in a washer, and so a Maytag or a GE could sell that information to like a P&G or somebody else that makes detergent and sell them usage data in aggregate of, and they would be very interested in that. So that opens up a whole new business model that they never had because they now have a lot more data about those customers.
That's interesting, the sawdust model. Well, just in general, those 4 different, benefits for the connected washer dryer. I think 3 of them are for the manufacturer. And so for me, it kind of brings up the question, and I'm interested in your opinion, the data. Who owns that data, for that washer and dryer? I guess it's great I get a message when my wash is done. Cool. I guess it's great I get a message if it's about to break down and I can spend a bit more money. I guess that's good. But really what we are is like a little laboratory for these manufacturers who are getting this data. So who owns that data and what's the value of that data?
Again, it's the wild, wild west, and that's some of the conversation that's going on. I attended a really great talk at South by Southwest in Austin this year, and they kind of talked about just this subject, that if you own the sensors or you own the products, should it be your data? And, right now it's most of the manufacturers are saying no. And, I think it needs to be manufacturers to be responsible with that data and make sure that it's, used very cautiously. And anytime they're, selling it or doing anything with it, that it's done in aggregate and take personal details out of it and, things like that. Because that can be really sensitive data. You get away from a washer and dryer and start to talk about a motion sensor or something like that, you're starting to talk about when people are home or not, and that's really, can be pretty risky. So I think it needs to be handled very carefully, and anytime you're designing IoT projects, you have to do it with security and privacy in mind from the beginning, and ensure that it's done right.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the other, this is my opinion, but I think the other dimension here is to consider the value of the data. And for example, I use the Google products, I use Maps, I use the email. I haven't used an email client in I don't know how many years, and I get an awesome product. But in exchange, and I make this conscious decision, I allow them to have my data. So perhaps, one consideration for manufacturers is to value or quantify the value of the data they will get. Let's use the washer and dryer example. Quantify the value of that data and maybe pass it on to the consumer. So when I go to Sears or I go to wherever I'm buying my appliance and I see 2 prices, one is $300. I don't know what they cost. Let's say one's $500. The other one's $300, but we're going to be using your data. I don't know. Maybe that could be a way at least that the consumer makes a conscious decision and trades value for value for the data. What do you think?
I think you're seeing that a little bit in the market. I know Nest is doing some of that kind of stuff.
Oh, really?
In terms of their giving data to the energy providers, and they're also doing some things where, like, you can sign up for a program where during peak hours they can adjust your temperature to, save brownouts and things like that. So, and that, will give you $100 off your energy bill. So I think you're getting there. And I think there's some debate to that. I think Apple just came out and said, we don't keep that data on you. And that's how they're responsible, is they just kind of they only keep the important data and they pass
the metadata.
They pass on the stuff that they don't want to know and they don't want to be responsible for. So, I would say the same to manufacturers. You don't want to just keep everything. You want to think about it and really only keep the stuff that's valuable to you. And then you need to turn around and provide value to the customer. So I know you said that most of my examples were benefits to the manufacturer, but a responsible manufacturer would use that data to ultimately benefit the customer, whether that's new features or, better customer service and things like that. And I think when you do that, you're going to build a much better product, which will in turn, drive customers to that product. So that's part of what I guess that data provides, is a better customer experience and product in the long run.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's good advice that you have for, I think, these manufacturers. Well, Adam, this has been great. Can you provide our listeners with some coordinates? Where can people find out more about your company? Where can they connect with you on maybe Twitter or however they, however you like to be connected? But just provide some contact information.
Sure. So you can find us on the web at gridconnect.com and also connectsense.com for our consumer line of things, of products. And Twitter, Grid Connect and ConnectSense, or you can find myself personally at Adam Justice on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, we'll put all this in the show notes, and I appreciate your time, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Okay. That was an informative talk with Adam Justice of Grid Connect. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support this show by buying my book, IoT Inc, or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is Unraveling the Complexity of Connecting Embedded Sensors in IoT with Mike Wright. Hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next week, may your path to IoT business be a sensible one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc Business Show.